I'll touch on what's going on within MAGA and the Republican Party first,
Mhm.
and then to pros and cons, probably mostly cons of launching a strike on Iran.
Also is not just simply the numbers, but the fact that we're seeing some significant cracks in the MAGA movement. I'm going to suggest involvement could be another one of these failed regime change junkets.
Netanyahu is crashing and burning politically, and unfortunately, he's considering taking the rest of the world with him.
It's another Friday, and that means it's another edition of Real Polling in Real Time with Zogby. As always, I'm John Zogby, and I'm accompanied by my son, Jeremy Zogby, the managing partner of our firm. And we're going to keep it short, but we have a lot to cover. How are you doing this week, Jer?
I'm doing well, all things considered. And before you get into it, I just want to highlight that we are going to field our next monthly survey probably about Tuesday or Wednesday. So we'll have the most up-to-date data on the situation between Iran and Israel and the United States, potential involvement, and we'll have gone through over a full week after that whole situation blew up. And so we'll have fresh data on the topic.
Okay, that's great to know. And of course, if anybody wants to participate in that poll, they should get directly in touch with you.
Yes.
So let's go with what we have. And what we have in terms of real time is a YouGov poll that they did on behalf of The Economist, in which it shows that 63% of U.S. adults opposed the United States becoming involved in a military situation in Iran. That's how they put it. And what's stunning about that are a few things. First of all, on the lead up to the United States becoming involved in Iraq in 2003, and we were doing daily tracking, it was 48% who supported and 47% who opposed U.S. Getting involved in a military situation in Iraq. Here we've got 63%. Number two is that it's across the board in the YouGov poll. So it's well over 70% of both Democrats, slightly less, but still over 70% of independents who oppose U.S. Involvement. It's also 53% of Republicans. Now, this is intriguing in a lot of ways because on most major issues involving President Trump, he can count on support from about 88 to 90% of Republicans on pretty much every issue. But in this instance, 53% oppose this kind of military activity. So politically, it's hard to see where this makes sense. Politically, also, is not just simply the numbers, but the fact that we're seeing some significant cracks in the MAGA movement. People with followings who are credible among Trump supporters, Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, just to name a couple.
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Marjorie Taylor Greene in a very strong statement. And so it's not going to be just simply a poll response. It's going to be apparently a very active and vocal response. I'm not going to go too far, but let me just say that geopolitically, no sense from this at all. First of all, there are questions about whether or not there is sufficient capacity in our bunker buster bombs to go deep into the nuclear storage facility, suggesting that at the very least this will not be quick and dirty if we attempt to take Iran's facility out. And I'm not sure the American people have much patience for something long and drawn out. The other thing that's troubling is the change in conversation to regime change. There is no question about the fact that the Ayatollah and mullahs are not good people. There's no question about the fact that they are very unpopular, and that Iran is always on the verge of some sort of revolt. What there is doubt about is whether or not an outside force, and notably the United States and Israel, could impose a regime change on Iran. I will just tell you that what I'm reading thus far indicates that even among the most ardent liberal reformers in Iran, none of them want to see their country attacked. They want to say goodbye to the Ayatollah, but they don't want to see their country attacked. I could give even more evidence than that, but I'm going to suggest that involvement could be another one of these failed regime change junkets, notably Vietnam, Iraq, which is a failed state mess, Afghanistan right back in the hands of the Taliban, Libya, which is in a state of anomie. We're not in a good situation right now if things continue the way they are.
Yeah. I'll touch on what's going on within MAGA and the Republican Party first, and then to the pros and cons, probably mostly cons, entirely cons of launching a strike on Iran, and very basic evidence. But you mentioned Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson. There's Rand Paul, there's Thomas Massey, Steve Bannon. And what's going on there is the entire Trump brand was built on both internationally and domestically America first. And so in the domestic sense, America first, that played into the southern border, the notion of quote unquote open border policy, and a tougher stance or a more thorough stance on vetting immigration. That's domestically. And then, of course, there was America first on the international scene, which translated to raising the question, which I think catapulted Donald Trump's first campaign into the stratosphere. That first question was, do we even really need to have NATO? And if we are going to have NATO, maybe they should be paying us. And so that is how America First was built. And America First 2.0 was even stronger in the 2024 election and campaign for presidency. And we've had this problem for over 2 decades now, almost 3 decades, where the neoconservative ideology has infected both political parties. They found their way into the Bush administration. They found their way into the Obama administration. They found their way into the Trump administration. And I think there are voices today that say, look, Republicans are looking at the Democratic Party in free fall. They've got no real message. They've got no real platform. And we saw that play out in November of 2024. Well, I think Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, Rand Paul, and a whole host of others see that the Republican Party could very well be in the same position. Both parties can be in a free fall if the party of America First blatantly contradicts America First by getting involved in a war that is entirely of Netanyahu's creation, who, by the way, is an architect or an accomplice in the building of let's say, the application of the neoconservative ideology. He doesn't go back to the philosophical roots, but he certainly goes back to the implementation of the neoconservative agenda, which is toppling regimes and regime change. And so really all one has to do to know what will happen if the president decides to move forward on this, and you've already mentioned this, but I'll put it simpler. Look at Iran on a map and look to its west, Iraq, and look to its east, Afghanistan. And we've already seen that those have ended badly in 2-decade-long wars with hundreds of thousands, if not millions, displaced. Still to this day, dysfunctional regimes, and arguably better functioning before the war, at least in the case of Iraq. And then you throw into the third case study, Iran, a nation of 90 million people with a history of over 3,000 years, cultural pride, intelligent people, very proud people, and rightfully so. And you think for 1 second that toppling the regime, even if unpopular, is going to be welcomed? Well, we were told the same thing about Saddam Hussein. Well, I'll tell you, Saddam Hussein is nothing like the Ayatollah, by my estimate. So that's going to fail, and it's going to fail big time, because other players very well might get involved, chiefly Russia and possibly China. The last thing I'll say is, for Democrats, and I'm just throwing this out there, I have seen a voice of reason emerge that nobody is looking at within, we could say, the Democratic Party, and I don't know if this gentleman still identifies himself as a Democrat or not, but a voice of reason has emerged ever since Ukraine and the war between Ukraine and Russia, and now he's speaking out about Iran, and that is, of course, the renowned, globally acclaimed Jeffrey Sachs. And if anybody wants to hear from the perspective of a Democrat what is going on, what is at stake, and how these two conflicts, what happens if they coalesce or converge, you need to listen to Jeffrey Sachs. He has all the credibility in the world when it comes to geopolitics and when it comes to relations between nations. And he is made and this is my closing point, he made the point that he thinks, he's not predicting, but he thinks Trump may come to his senses about how bad this is. I hope he's right. But nonetheless, I think if he were to become more involved in positioning himself, I think he would do very well.
I'm a big fan of Jeffrey Sachs in a number of regards. Just by way of a few brief comments, number one, historically, we already did regime change in Iran. 1953, an elected government, a conservative fundamentalist, Mohammad Mossadegh, who wanted to nationalize the oil fields in Iran, and the CIA, and that's stated fact, overthrew him, and the United States imposed the Shah for about a decade and a half. And that was a disaster. At any given moment, there were 150,000 political prisoners in Iran. And so regime change already did not work in Iran. The second thing is, just by way of a story, an article that I had read 14, 15 years ago when Ahmadinejad was the president of Iran, and all sorts of controversies about the the reform movement in Iran and getting rid of the mullahs, and in fact, even the possibility of attacking Iran. And there was an interview done with gay Iranian men in London, and they were talking about the fact that they had exiled themselves into London because of the impossibility of fulfillment, of being who they were in Iran, and very critical of the mullahs. And the reporter for Time said, and what if Iran is attacked? And to a man, every one of them said, I must go back and fight for my country, because I fight for the soul of my country, even if I oppose its leadership. And this would just simply be a total miscalculation, a total ego trip, and a total sense of unreality if this planned attack, let's say, and it is a planned attack, were to go forward and the United States were to support it. That's my final point.
I mean, I'll just say that's because the gay men in London, by way of Iran, don't trace their lineage back to the Ayatollah Revolution. They trace their lineage back to King Cyrus and Darius, the Persian Empire. They've been around quite a long time, one of the most successful empires in world history and people. In terms of longevity and sophistication. And then the last point is really what's going on here is that Netanyahu is crashing and burning politically, and unfortunately, he's considering taking the rest of the world with him.
Sad, and that's a sad note to end on, but it is a real.
And it's that simple. It's got nothing to do with Israel, with religion, and hate towards them. It has to do with a very bad, corrupt leader and his willingness, having crossed over from hubris into nemesis. And that's where he's at. And hopefully we're not there.
Well, on that sad note, we'll close this week. And it is a sad note because none of us knows what's going to happen next, but we do know what could happen if mistakes are allowed to continue. Have a good week. We'll have that fresh polling data next time around, and we'll get it out as soon as we have it. We won't wait until Friday if it comes sooner.
Yep.
Okay. Take care.
Yep. Take care.